Hey everybody, Alex Kazora, SteelersDepot.com, back with some Pittsburgh Steelers free agency predictions. Free agency starting on Wednesday the 16th, the legal tampering period opening up on Monday, March 14th. So Pittsburgh here pretty soon will be addressing any free agents of their own that are pending and slated to hit free agency, guys they re-sign and guys that will test the market. So I wanted to go through here as briefly as possible and give my predictions. Some, hopefully, which will be right, and I'm sure some will be wrong that people will yell at me in the comments about and say these predictions aged well. But here are my predictions for what will happen with the Steelers free agents. There are 16 of them. Which guys will stay? Which guys will go? Here are my thoughts. We'll start here with cornerback Ahkello Witherspoon. I think he ultimately will re-sign with the Steelers, but I think he will test the market initially. So I don't believe, and we'll see what happens, but I don't believe he will sign prior to Wednesday at 4 p.m. He's indicated he wants to test the market. He rushed into signing with Seattle last year, wasn't a good fit for him. Granted, he knows Pittsburgh more than he knew Seattle as an unrestricted free agent last year, but I think he wants to see what his options are. But I think ultimately he will come back to Pittsburgh. I think he liked the scheme much better than Seattle. Seattle was a lot of zone. Pittsburgh played more man and just a more mix of coverages in general. And Pittsburgh, I think, certainly does have a needed corner if they do not re sign Joe Haden. So I think Witherspoon will test and then come back, but I don't guarantee it because if he tests and gets an offer, then certainly he could go somewhere else. So I think we've kind of gone into a default assumption he'll come back, and I want to just be careful of that. But ultimately, I do think he'll resign. Cornerback Arthur Maulet. This one really could go either way. He was a rundown slot corner last year, a very poor man's Mike Hilton. I think he will come back on the cheap. He may not resign before Wednesday, may not resign for a couple of weeks, but as just a cheap slot option, I think there's a fit there if they can't find something else on the market, maybe a Bryce Callahan or someone like that, Tavon Young, for example. But I think Maulet will come back on the cheap. Offensive lineman, guard center BJ Finney. I think he's gone. Don't think Pittsburgh has really any interest in bringing him back. Barely played last year. Hassenauer's a top backup center, potentially even a starter in terms of a competition with Kendrick Green. If his struggles continue, I think they look elsewhere beyond BJ Finney. Offensive tackle Chuck Wilmore Corford. This one is probably the one I struggle with the most. And maybe there's a bit of bias with me because I personally am not too enthused over the idea of re signing him. But short answer, I think they will re-sign him. I think for a couple of reasons. I think they're going to be heavy in the guard market this free agency. I think they're going to look to address guard more than tackle. They don't want to lose both of Trai Turner and a Corfor and try to fill, 2/5 of their starting offensive line with questions about Kendrick Green as well in one offseason. They tried to do all those fixes last year. It did not ultimately go well. I think their thought is if they can get the rest of the line to develop, they bring in a good guard through free agency or through the draft. They bank on Green developing. They bank on Dan Moore developing. Kevin Dotson being healthy. And after that ankle sprain last year, that overall it'll be a pretty good line. The free agency offensive tackle class is not very good. There are not a lot of other external options in free agency. It is a pretty good tackle class in the draft, but if Pittsburgh's calculation is we may aggressively pursue a quarterback in the draft, trade up for one, potentially we may not have the draft capital or the ability to take one of those tackles. And so we may be in a tough spot there if a core four is let go. They don't really sign anyone in for agency. Then they trade up for, say, a Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett in the draft, and they're really scrambling to find a right tackle because there really is no great other in-house replacement. Zach Banner is there. Will he stay? Yeah, that's another question, I suppose. But for all those reasons, in a core for his play being average, I guess, I'm not a big fan of his overall game, but I think he will resign. The number about what he'll go for, probably higher than you think. Tackles are expensive. Linemen in general, just expensive to retain and keep and things like that. So I think it could be at least $7 million, probably even more than that. But my prediction, Chuck Wilmore for re-signs with the Steelers. Tight end Eric Ebron, easy answer here. He's gone. I don't believe anyone thinks Eric Ebron will re-sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers, probably including Eric Ebron. So his time in Pittsburgh probably will come to an end. Wide receiver James Washington, think he's gone as well. Again, we're probably pretty much all in agreement in that. Don't think he enjoyed his last year in Pittsburgh too terribly much. Did not play for whatever reason, lack of versatility. Their faith and insistence on getting Claypool to develop and play. So Washington will look for a cheap deal elsewhere. Cornerback Joe Haden, I'm pretty confident he's not going to be re-signed. There's always that chance, but just based on the way that Hayden's tweeted, does not seem like he's feeling the love from Pittsburgh right now. Obviously, he tried to do an extension last summer at training camp. That did not happen. Led to Rosenhaus saying they're going to test the market. Hayden, just with his age and declining speed, he's still a good player and can play the run hard and veteran savvy and a really key leader or glue guy. But are you going to pay money in the future as his play diminishes more and more and the speed falls off more and more and there's some knee injuries as well? I just don't see it happening. So that's why I went with Witherspoon being re-signed. I think Hayden will have to look elsewhere. Quarterback Josh Dobbs. This one, maybe he comes back later in the year. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty with the quarterback position in Pittsburgh right now, but I think he will not be re-signed. I'm not sure if he really wants to come back. There's not really a clear path for him to compete, and they're going to be adding quarterbacks in for agency and probably the draft as well. At least make an attempt in the draft. So, I would not be mad if Dobbs wanted to come back. I think that'd be fine, but I think he'll go somewhere else. Wide receiver JuJu Smith-Schuster. There's certainly a chance he comes back, and Pittsburgh and Kevin Colbert are open to the idea of him coming back. I think we'll certainly look to test the market the way that he tested last year. I mean, he was in free agency for almost a week and had offers from Baltimore and Kansas City who aggressively pursued him before returning to Pittsburgh. I think ultimately he will go somewhere else and not be re-signed by the Steelers. He came back last year, he said, for two primary reasons: one, to play with Ben, and two, because he liked wide receivers coach Ike Hilliard, and neither of those guys are Steelers anymore. So he came back, he took less money, he saw out the end of Ben's career. Obviously, 2021 was not the year that he hoped it would be. But I think he'll look somewhere else at this point. I mean, the market's hard to predict with the injury and that whole situation. I'm not sure what he's going to command. I think he wants a multi-year deal. I think it's going to be tough to do coming off a year with a shoulder injury. He played only 5 games. His numbers overall have not been great. His market was pretty cool last year. Is it really going to get a lot hotter this year after playing 5 games and catching 20 passes or whatever he did for not a lot of yards, not a lot of big plays? But all that aside, there should be some level of interest, and they will start over somewhere new with a different team. Running back Kallen Ballage, take it or leave it. He could come back on the minimum, but I don't really see the point. I'd go find another running back and maybe get some better talent as a runner. So I think he goes, but if he resigns, it's not going to move the needle much. Safety Miles Killebrew. We did this exercise on the podcast, and so I'm just including Killebrew's name here because I said he would resign. He has now officially re-signed a 2-year, $4 million deal. I think most people thought he would come back, so I'm not trying to brag about my rightness of this, but it made sense. He was a good core special teamer, blocked 2 punts, like playing for Danny Smith, so this one always felt like an almost slam dunk to re-sign, and now he has re-signed. Nose tackle Montravius Adams. I think he'll re-sign. I don't want to put those odds, too terribly high. I think there's, better than 50% chance, obviously, because I'm saying he's going to resign. But, he could look elsewhere with Tyson Alu returning. He played well for Pittsburgh, though. I think he liked the opportunity, liked Mike Tomlin. And, again, Alu is 35. To its status uncertain. I think he might look in that tampering period, see what's going on, if there's interest around the league. But I think ultimately comes back to Pittsburgh. Couple more names here. Wide receiver Ray-Ray McCloud. Sounds like there's going to be a market for him. I'm not surprised by that. I mean, when anytime you're a kick-in, punt returner, and slot receiver, you wear a lot of hats. There's going to be some interest there. Obviously, I don't think there's going to be a lot of money thrown McCloud's way. I think he does come back to Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh would re-sign him because he's been a decent returner, and the kick and punt game was elevated. His kick return game, which was in the basement for so many years, to be at least about average. Obviously, he's not a super dynamic guy, but I think they like his effort, his versatility, the hats that he wears. Again, there will be some level of a market for him, but I think he comes back to Pittsburgh. Outside linebacker Taco Charlton. I think he goes. Obviously, similar to Ballage, he could be re-signed, but it felt like Derek Tusko was playing a little bit more over him later last season and was having some more success. Charlton does not play on special teams. While I think he was more comfortable standing up than I anticipated, he's probably still best and ideally fitting in a 4-3 system, playing with his hand on the ground more than he did. And so my guess is that he goes. Obviously, Pittsburgh could bring him back as some depth and add to that edge room as well for some more competition. But if I had to make a guess, I'll say he goes somewhere else, probably because he would rather go somewhere else, maybe more so than Pittsburgh allowing him or at least deciding we don't want you back. Final two pretty big names here. Starter strong safety Terrell Edmunds. This one I certainly went back and forth on, and I was very wrong last year about them putting the option on him. I thought they would pick up the 5th-year option on him. Obviously, they did not. And usually that means that that guy's not coming back. But Edmonds has kind of been in a different circumstance where he's not, a bust the way that Artie Burns or Jarvis Jones was. Ultimately, I think he does resign. I think the energy spent and the capital and the money spent to try to find his replacement probably isn't worth it. And by no means is Edmonds a great player, but he's solid and steady and known enough and a good enough compliment to Minka Fitzpatrick that I'm not sure you're going to go spend a bunch more money on an outside free agent or go spend a high draft pick on a rookie and hope he pans out. So I think just to kind of add some stability and a known guy in that room that's still young and has played all right and has made small improvements year by year, especially in coverage, I think Edmonds will resign probably in that $5 to $6 million range. If he's looking for more than that, then Pittsburgh probably goes somewhere else. Jordan Whitehead from Tampa Bay is an option, although he may cost more than Edmonds will. But ultimately, while I'm not very confident in this, I think he will resign. That's my prediction. And finally, right guard Trai Turner. I think he goes. I think he did his job of what last year needed to be for him and for the Steelers. He needed a job. Pittsburgh needed a right guard with experience when DeCastro found out with the ankle stuff and the spring that he was not going to be available. And they needed some leadership in that O-line room as well. And Turner provided both. He's physical, he's aggressive and pass pro, but he's not getting really any better, and this team needs to make some more dramatic and drastic moves to improve its offensive line. And so while Turner, I think would be open to staying in Pittsburgh, I think the Steelers say it's a pretty good guard market. Let's go find some higher level guy because the Steelers do have some money to play with. So those are my free agency predictions. I'll put a list of the guys I think resign with the Steelers, and I don't expect to get all these right, obviously, but those are my thoughts. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Who do you think resigns? Who do you think leaves the Steelers? And let me know why as well. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. We'll certainly be posting a lot more once free agency begins and analyze any outside free agents the Steelers do end up signing. Hopefully, there'll be a couple of really more marquee, interesting names that we can talk about. So, again, I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll talk to you soon.